I'm noticing that my quilt on top of my bed is electrostatically charged, and I still have the sleep circuit connected to the earthing bedsheet on a diagonal underneath it with two blankets and a sheet between. So I'm beginning to think that possibly this is verification of what I have been postulating of late, that a current running through distilled water in a colloidal silver generator, creating colloidal silver in vast or minuscule quantity, regardless, is charging up the dielectric material of the container and creating a voltage difference between the environment, the airspace outside the container, and the vat of water inside, even though its current, which is supposedly shorted out by the return leg of the circuit going back to the source, doesn't appear to be all going back. And that it appears that there's some loss, we could call it not efficiency, undercutting the 100% efficiency theoretical that circuit starts with before you start to subtract all of the non-efficiencies. So there's some so-called resistance, what I would prefer to call conversion, of electromotive force being converted into electrostatic force, because we do have a capacitor set up. We've got the two silver electrodes inside, and the so-called electrolyte of water and silver particles on the inside, between them between the electrodes, and the case is the dielectrical circumference containing all of this, which is building up a charge, because the environment is different. It has a different charge. It's not as intense. It doesn't have electricity passing through the airspace. So this is literally how a transverse form of energy, kinetic energy in the form of electromotive force, is being converted. Some of it, a small amount, is being and accumulating at the same time a static charge in the container, which here is represented by the quilt on the top of my bed. Got a mild circuit underneath, and yet it builds up a static charge. Now, is it because it's wintertime? Maybe. Because I move across it? Well, it didn't happen in the summer. Why is it always in the winter? Because the humidity is lower. Electrostatics likes a dry air environment. Water gets in the way. I wonder why. Because it creates ions. By convective movement, probably transfer charge. So when you don't have convective transference, then you have buildup. So the dry air acts as a better insulator. As an extension of the container, it becomes a much more efficient insulator. And that means that the container builds up charge and doesn't lose it much more efficiently. And so does the quilt on top of my bed. Now, this is interesting because what this means is we don't even have to create an electrostatic charged field surrounding an electromagnetic sustained wave, singularity, or a system of waves to create a Hutchison effect or to work in that direction. All that is needed is the right characteristics to allow a naturally forming electrostatic field to build up on its own. And this is what Richard Hackenberger must have discovered in his development of the EV Gray motor when he first came on the scene and decided not to use a second bank of batteries to discharge a buildup of charge into. Even prior to that, he was simply trying to do he was trying to do whatever it was he was trying to do, and he ended up creating a configuration in which the chassis became one of the two plates of a capacitor situation, and the airspace inside was the dielectric. So he never charged up the aluminum chassis this is an important point. I've never even thought about it. Where did the charge come from? He never charged it up. It charged itself. He simply configured it so that it would get charged up. Or I should say the dielectrical airspace in the middle got charged up, and then he had to regulate that by blowing compressed air through it so that it wouldn't build up too much charge nor build up ionic pathways such that it would start to arc. So actually all you have to do is make sure you've got two plates. One of them can be floating. Actually, I wonder if both plates can be floating plates. I don't know. At least one can be floating, that's for sure. I've already dealt with that myself at earthinglife.info. So, you know what? No, both plates are, because you charge it with a coil. This is weird. You charge the dielectrical space between two floating plates with a coil of wire. That means that a coil of wire, to some degree, can have an electrostatic impact on its environment, provided its environment is set up to build up an electrostatic charge. We're told that lightning dissipates charge buildup between the upper atmosphere and the Earth. What if it's the other way around? What if they're lying? What if lightning creates the static difference, the charge difference between the upper atmosphere and the Earth? It's possible that we've been lied to, that it's actually the other way around. Because when we look at the Sun as a planet, that is the way it's interpreted, that lightning arises from the planetary surface of the Sun, from the calcium, what is it called? Ferrocalcite or calcium ferrite? Calcium ferrite. The calcium ferrite surface. It arises from the surface and charges the neon and silicon plasma clouds above the surface, and those two clouds are constitute the photosphere. And when a lightning strike rises, right above it, a solar flare is arising from out of the plasma envelope, the plasma-sized photospheric envelope of the Sun as a planet. So, if that's the case, why should it be any different here? Why are we told it's the other way around? Because we're not told that the Sun is a planet. That's why. So, planets generate energy and dissipate it to their environment. We are not equalizing. And we're told this is the source of the Schumann resonance, that the lightning strikes average out and they create yada yada, but now it's shifting, it's going up higher, oh my god, let's worry about it along with global warming. Oh my god, this is disgusting. If we're told it's backwards, if we're told something that is backwards, then it undermines everything else that goes with it as a consequence. And global warming might be one of them. But the Schumann resonance shifting is another. It may be so irrelevant. It may be shifting it on its own, because if the Earth is putting out energy and dissipating it to its environment, then all of the lightning strikes are regulated by the internal mechanics of the Earth itself. And if they're shifting, it's the Earth deciding to do so. And they're shifting in the upward direction, creating a rise of the Schumann resonance. So, that might explain the global warming. That in itself. And it might explain the ozone holes. They can't compete. They become unstable because the lightning is too severe. We didn't have any plant life when lightning was more severe in the very early stages of the Earth's formation, when we had a lot of earthquakes and lava, volcanoes, tectonic plate movement. And we know there was more lightning, and so we didn't have carbon-based life. We had silica-based life, more short-lived. And we didn't have oceans, we had just pools, little tiny pools, shallow pools. And so we had all this siliceous fluid in which silicon was in a soluble state, making silica-based life, animal life, prevalent. And the conditions were not right for carbon because there was no oxygen in the air. It was all like, methane and carbon dioxide. And so we've been lied to. And, it's so politicized and people get so emotional. Oh, global warming, we're responsible. No, we're not. The Earth is stepping it up. And the Schumann resonance is not an average of equalizing lightning strikes between the upper atmosphere and the Earth. It's the other way around. And we're told, well, no, but sometimes lightning arises, but most of the time it's coming down. Well, hello, we're told that a diode points in the direction of current flow, which is the opposite direction to electron flow. So if they're saying that the lightning is coming down, that means the electrons are coming down, but the current is going up. Does it really make a difference? What is current? It's holes in their theory. I mean, it's their theory akin to transistors. In other words, it's electron holes that are moving upwards. But in what form? Nobody knows. They're not electrons. What would they be? Ions? Positively charged ions flowing upwards, making an ionic channel? But so what? We're told the electrons are flowing downwards, yet on the sun it would have to be flowing upwards to create a solar flare at the same time, coming out of the photosphere. I don't know, there's something wrong here. There's something very wrong. It has to be the other way around. It has to be a dissipation of electrical energy from inside the Earth that's creating lightning. So why did I say this? Because that's the way electricity works in a colloidal silver generator. And that's the way, and that's how silver can plate out on the inside of the container, and that's how the chassis of an EV gray motor got charged up with electrostatic charge on its own through no concerted effort of a circuit to charge it up. And that's why you can have both plates floating plates. Because you've got a coil of wire in the interior space that's dissipating an electrostatic charge between the windings. The insulation creates spaces between each winding, and that creates capacitance within the coil of wire. We were taught this. All right. That's why I went to the trouble of going to those conferences the few times that I did go. Every coil of wire has capacitance built into it. And obviously, if you have capacitance, then you've got yourself the beginnings of an electrostatic field, provided you have two plates surrounding the coil that are separated by a dielectrical space. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to bound the field. It's just the field dissipates, and so you don't get a field buildup. But with two or more plates separated by a dielectrical space between them, then you can define your bounded domain that will build up an electrostatic charge. It's like, people in the old days, they built temples hoping that the deity that they put the statue in the middle of would invite the non-physical, the original deity to come and inhabit that space. And they'd pray to the deity, and they'd put their attention on the deity, and hopefully it would stay there and make it its home. And so they would, do things that are very human, anthropomorphic, to invite it. They would bathe the statue of the deity with food and various herbs and spices and garment fabrics. This is in the East, in the Hindu religion. And yet we do the same thing when we put a coil of wire and bound it with two or more floating plates to create an electrostatic domain surrounding that coil of wire. Because the coil of wire has already got capacitance going on, but it's lively, and it's the charging aspect. So, that means there's feedback between the charged electrostatic domain surrounding that coil because of the plates that are set up around it, and the coil itself. And if you get the configuration right, it could very much build or do the opposite, depending on whether it's consonant or dissonant, I suppose. I don't know how you vary that. E.V. Gray or Richard Hagenberger did it by flushing air through, and that would regulate. They did something. Maybe he had to choose a motor that had a certain rotary rate, a certain RPM, to create its own frequency signature upon the air that was moving through, flushing through the interior chassis of the E.V. Gray motor. I don't know. I'm just, I'm speculating wildly here to wonder. But it's obvious that I had overlooked something. So, 2 electrodes in a vat of distilled water, with or without particles of silver, but let's say with. Those 2 electrodes have a space between them, and so we have capacitance. We have capacitance, we have conductance, we have ionic discharge, we've got all things, a complex of things going on, which is usually the way a circuit has to be looked at anyway, or any component or pair or set of components anyway. It's a complex of situation. And then you look to see what's dominant and what's recessive, to what degree, and how do they interact over time. It gets complicated to analyze a situation, obviously, to fully understand what's going on. But this is something I'd overlooked, and I couldn't understand, or I didn't appreciate. I didn't appreciate what the Hutchinson effect was, that you don't have to induce an electrostatic field. Now, according to Dr. Judy Wood, there was an input, 2 inputs, into 9/11 that contributed to the electrostatic field. One was a tornado approaching metropolitan Manhattan from the west, and another was a hurricane approaching from the southeast over the Pacific, over the Atlantic. And they converged on Manhattan at the same time, more or less. That was their target. They were moving in that direction. They didn't, come really up close, but they came somewhat close. And they were pincing. It was a pincer effect, similar to what Trevor Constable had to do in order to create rain in L.A. in the middle of the summer, or the elimination of smog at the very least. He called it Project Pincer or something, because he had to come in from 2 or 3 different directions, all from the south generally, but some from the southeast, some from the direct south, to come and converge on Los Angeles at the same time, because it's very hard to make rain in the desert, as anybody can imagine. But he managed to put it off. Pull it off. Twice. In the 80s, in the mid-1980s. So, she's alluding to something entirely different than what I'm describing, that you can. And this is what I assumed. I assumed her perspective. But now I see it's possible to go either way. Or both. Even better. Both is good. Both is very good. So now at least I can appreciate what, a little better, what could be going on in a circuit, in a very simple circuit, if you just, all the simple elements, if you put it together the right way. You get a build-up, a feedback, a consonant feedback that builds up potency because you've configured everything right. So the coil of wire is like the icon in the middle of the church, and the church building is the container that builds up the electrostatic charge. And when you think about it, electrostatic, right? Static. It's not moving anywhere. Well, it's vibrating, but it's not set in motion through current, through a short between 2 voltage points. So it's a buildup. You get a buildup, and that's what a bunch of congregants praying do, or a bunch of Gregorian monks doing their chanting. In Latin, you get a buildup. So the music is the moving wave, but you get a buildup of a standing wave or a standing set of waves that constitutes the equivalence No, that feeds the electrostatic field. The electrostatic field is still something different than a standing kinetic wave. But a standing kinetic wave has a much better chance of building up that electrostatic field than if it's not a standing wave. Because it's here today, gone tomorrow, and it's not around to provide for the buildup. So actually, you do need a resonant standing transverse wave to be efficient at building up an electrostatic field. And then they could possibly build on each other. It's quite possible. But if the standing wave in any event is let's say, a tritone off of the resonant wave of the structure of the twin tower, let's say, then you get a destructive influence between the two, a destructive interval. Now, the fellow, I can't say a thing about what the fellow is saying, in contradicting me. It's in another universe that I'm not familiar with, so I have no means of comparing what he's saying with what I'm saying. I can't anymore. I realize it can't be done. So if I should ever understand what he's saying, then I'd have something to say about it, but I don't. So I have to leave it alone. And I don't pray for insight, if it'll either come or it won't come. I don't pray for anything. Basically. It's very open-ended on my part. I don't expect anything to come my way. Certainly not understanding. Just because I desire it doesn't mean I expect it to come. Yeah, I'm not that kind of person to affirmation. I've given up on affirmation a long time ago. I simply, affirmation of a sort. I dwell on it. But only so long as I dwell on it. If that's my affirmation, then so be it. But that's about as far as it goes. Okay. Well, it's good. I'm making progress, a little bit at a time. I get a better appreciation of what I'm trying to grope for. What I said previously is that we might be talking past each other. And it might still hold because maybe what I have to say doesn't even apply to what he says, and maybe what I have to say, I'm just using various opportunities as an excuse to develop my theory that may not apply to those circumstances, and maybe his does, So I exercise my theory. I use an opportunity, but maybe he's more apropos to the circumstance. How would I know? See, that's the part I don't know. But I still stand behind my attempt to theorize and to hone it because I have a specific purpose in mind, and it's not to do with the examples that I bring up. Those are an attempt to exercise the theory, but not an attempt to apply it necessarily, even though I make overture in doing just that. My only goal is to try to figure out how it could be possible to replicate Tesla's trimetal generator based on what limited information William Line has given us. What else can we add to that we already know? Or may shortly know, because it's not exactly rocket science. I don't think so. I think, in principle, it comes down to utter simplicity of a complex sort, but simple enough that a picture could be painted in theory alone that would explain it. Or else I wouldn't have attempted to do this 2 years ago, to try to figure it out with very limited experimentation, because I don't know where to begin to experiment, I made a little attempt at earthinglife.info, and that was a good start. A lot better than I had studying the watt-hour meters that I bought off of eBay. That was very frustrating. I wasn't getting anywhere with that. Because I was using somebody else's device. See, that's the thing. You have to really create your own device and go from there. Recreating as you go along, but it has to be your fabrication, your relationship with the bench experiments to develop your theory or understanding. And so that's what I did and posted and documented over at earthinglife.info. I've had more satisfaction with that than anything else. But now I'm falling back on just pure hypothesizing. well, not pure, maybe 98%. Not a whole lot of experience to justify any of it. So if it looks like I'm hopping around, it's because I don't have anything to anchor me. Experience. I don't have any experience to anchor me. Except little experience here, little there, mostly imagination. I don't feel focused on the topic. I feel vague. You get that impression? Did I sound vague? Ambiguous, vague, confused? Yeah, that's me, alright. But that doesn't stop me from trying. No, I don't let it. And I know my intuition is very sound on this. I'll figure it out without having to go to anyone. People may come to me with ideas, or they may stimulate me without even trying to, by one means or another, unforeseeably. It's like a growth, an organic growth that takes on a mind of its own and a self-sufficient empowerment of its own, so I don't have to worry about it. It's just an intention, that's all, and then it just moves. It just, and I'm moved along with it, swept along a bit. So, I'm not too worried. Anywho, that's my contribution for today.